So, good morning, lunchtime. People who are watching this won't know that it's lunchtime, but it's your lunch break from the sculpture school, Andrew Sinclair, isn't it?
It is indeed.
So we've got Andrew talking to us, and normally he'd be eating. So we're very grateful. Thank you for sharing this time with us.
That's
So
a pleasure.
today I just wanted to chat to you really just so I can get to know you a bit better, and so everyone else can get to know you a bit better. Can you tell me just a bit about your background, where you grew up and whether art was part of your upbringing?
It is fascinating in life when you look back on things that what was complete confusion at the time, when you look back, becomes a sequence of events that leads to where you believe your success is. And when I look back on my childhood, I was fascinated by model making. I was fascinated by the human form. And my father was a silversmith, and he used to bring back things like copper wire that he thought I could play with. And I did. I would make little copper frames, and around those copper frames, I would put papier-mâché and make sharks and badgers and other things and dinosaurs, of course, because I've never grown up dinosaurs. All those things were made back then in a way that came from my imagination, and what my father was showing me was a practical way of doing things. And that led to a fascination with clay. So to the point where I thought that plasticine was something that kids had. I didn't want plasticine. I wanted real clay. And there was a little place down in the woods, down near the sea. I lived in Poole in Dorset, where there was a bank of clay. Sadly, just above the bank of clay was a little outlet for sewage.
Oh,
But I would go down there and dig the clay out. And interestingly, I was watching a program about Rodin, and of course, in his day, he had to dig clay out of the ground as well. You couldn't go and buy clay like you can today. So, in effect, what I was doing was something that was an age-old thing, that I was collecting the material to make the sculptures that I wanted to make. And they became more sophisticated, actually. They always smelt of poo, but they were more sophisticated. And it was that, looking back on it, that was a very early sign of the fact that I was less interested in painting and drawing and much more interested in three-dimensional work. And later on, when I did 2 terms of a foundation course at Bournemouth, because I really wanted to become an artist. And at the time, I was working for a lovely lady in the print industry who felt that I needed to get qualified in order to be able to move forwards. And I was I during this course we were taught to do figurative drawing, life drawing, and one of the students that had been there longer was doing a portrait of a person. He was doing the whole figure in clay, and I was utterly fascinated by this, infinitely more so than I was with drawing. But it is interesting when you're young, is that I was not aware of the fact that I was that fascinated. I was still taken with the idea that I was doing art per se, not necessarily sculpture. And frankly, I hated that foundation course. It was the onus being entirely on abstract art and shape and form didn't press my buttons. And I pulled out. I just left it because I felt frustrated. And my life became very complicated after that. I went to live in South Africa and all sorts of things happened. Yeah, I could see, looking back on it, those early factors that were pointing in a direction that was later to become something that filled my entire life. And it still does. I think to the day I die, I'll die sculpting with a blade in my hand. And that's looking back on it, I think that's where that inspiration came from, and the later on became something much more important.
it is interesting, isn't it? Because as children, we're just doing. We're just
Mm,
so it's just so instinctive, and we're just
mm.
doing things, and we don't think deeply about the meaning of life and where this might lead us. And oh, I must be a sculptor. I remember being at school, I didn't even know you could be an
No,
artist.
no.
I didn't even know that was a thing. that
mm,
you could, careers. Would you like to work in an office or in a shop?
mm,
It wasn't presented to us as an option. So it is really interesting looking back and going, oh, I get it now. Do you think
mm.
there were key people around you? You're saying about this guy, and your dad, but do you think there are other key people around you who were influencing you at that time as well? Now you look back.
Um, that lady that I worked for, her name was Eileen Sinclair. She was no relation of mine actually, but she was definitely a kind of auntie type figure. I got to know her very well, and I worked for her probably for about a year doing design work for her printmaking. And of course, it was very different in those days. You had to make each image in the different colors of the print, so you were repeating images and so on. So I was learning to produce designs, some of which actually oddly is still around. I think one of the designs I did, the company's still there, still using the same logo. Um, it was her that suggested that I became an artist, that I did something with my ability as an artist, which was always based upon that practicality. I mean, making stuff for printmaking at the time, you had to copy the same image over and over again with tracing paper and so on in order to be able to get the colors that you needed so that they could print it literally with ink. So all of this stuff's been forgotten now, of course, because you just press a button on a computer now. But it was that practical background that I came from. And it wasn't until much later, I think, that anything to do with art came through. Sadly, I went on to do everything else but art. The foundation course put me off so strongly, and I think it still does in a way when I look at the way that degrees are formulated now. It's very prescriptive. You cannot do figurative art, and it's very hard, particularly in sculpture, to be able to get any kind of figurative help whatsoever. In fact, I think, without blowing my own trumpet too much, but I do think that here in the sculpture school and in Florence at the Sculpture Academy, these are the only two places now where you really learn the the tools that you need psychologically to be able to create really beautiful sculpture,
Yeah, figurative sculpture. I think
figurative
that
sculpture.
you're right. I think it is very conceptual, isn't it? It's
Mm,
they're trying to help students seek something new,
mm.
but as a foundation, they probably just need to understand what already exists first.
That's true, and to me, it didn't press my buttons. And it's not that I'm saying that conceptual art is wrong. It's not, absolutely not. I use it and do it all the time, and I certainly use it in aspects of my figurative sculpture as well. It's just that it's about inspiration, I think, and if that's not coming from your soul, then you're not doing the right thing. If you're doing what other people tell you to do, you're not doing the right thing. What it has to feel is something in your heart and something in that sixth sense in your brain that tells you this is what really, really turns me on. And in my world, that is figurative sculpture. And it's that's the reality to me, not a decision as to whether or not figurative is better than or vice versa than conceptual art. I don't think it is. It's just a different form, and it's about the passion that you feel that's the most important thing. Don't let people tell you where your passion lies. Feel the passion.
That's so important, isn't it? We are kind of numb to feelings,
Mm,
I think, as
mm,
a society. We kind of not, as we go through and have, various experiences in our life, I think we do numb ourselves a little bit in order to just cope with life, especially after COVID
mm.
as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Numbing, generally numbing. It was a generally numbing period. But you're
Mm,
right, we do need to connect back. They say that we can only name like 6 or 7 feelings, and actually that
mm,
we have a spectrum of thousands of feelings every day,
mm,
and reconnecting with those is really important. So understanding your intuition, what your soul is telling
mm,
you, because that's what makes
mm,
us that individual human. There is a renaissance around life drawing. I found there's a
mm.
big renaissance around life drawing. Have you seen that yourself?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. We work with UCL and in Falmouth University, teaching anatomy. And we've also done the same oddly in Bournemouth because that's where I started out. And there is definitely a renaissance in this. They want to know this anatomy. They want to be able to understand how you physically draw something. And I'm very excited about that. And tutors are coming here to train in order to be able to train their students to do the same thing as well, because it is an intrinsic understanding. Anatomy is not about bones and muscle solely. It's about other factors that people don't really realize. Things like rhythm, which is pointing to. So, for example, the jaw rises slightly from the chin and it points to the occiput where the back of the cranium joins the neck. And that line is a pointing line. It's what I call rhythm. And rhythm in sculpture is incredibly important. And other factors like rules of thumb, for example, where if you take a point of measurement from the front of the forehead here to the back of the cranium here, halfway is just in front of your ear. And your ear lies slightly backwards, so it's lazy. And that is true of 90% of people. So 10% of people have upright ears. And so when you're looking and observing somebody, particularly in portraiture, if you
I'm looking at
notice
my
that their
ear
ear,
now.
yes, you're going to have to look in the mirror or get somebody else to tell you. But when you look at your ear, or you're looking at somebody else's ear, you don't just see an ear, you see the position of the ear as well. And that adds to your ability to observe. So rules of thumb are incredibly important. Then you have design criteria, which is how muscles all fit together like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle. So the actual notion of the way that anatomy works is very specific for creativity and for art. It's very different from medical anatomy. And I love that difference because that's what I lecture in when I'm talking to doctors. They want to repair a hand so that it works. I want to repair a hand with them so that it looks beautiful again. So you get the two together. Same thing with ears. Apparently, a lot of people lose their ears. So ear surgery or ear replacement surgery is quite a thing. And I love that kind of cosmetic surgery because it's important. Losing an ear would damage the way that you feel about yourself. It would be a loss of something. So putting it back and putting it back in a way that makes it beautiful is really important. And ears are complex, not because the design is complex, but because they exist on three different layers. So when you're looking at the designs, you break them down according to the perspective of that particular layer. And in doing so, that's quite difficult, actually. So people need to be trained to do it. So you need a doctor that's not only a brilliant physician, he's also brilliant at art, so that they can see how a beautiful ear is formulated and they can carve it out of cartilage that's been grown in a petri dish. So it's there's a huge relevance to all of this that
Wow.
runs right the way across the spectrum.
Yeah, you don't realise, do you? They stay STEM and then STEAM with the science, maths, art, and etc. And they are all interrelated because you need
They
to
are
have
hugely.
some sort of mathematical knowledge, don't you, to be able to do the rule of thumb, for instance.
Yeah, yeah. Part of our
Why?
logo is, sorry, go on.
I was just, and you carry on. You say what you're going to say.
No,
Part
I
of
was
your
just going to
logo.
say, as part of that, the way that I think about what I do is it's where art and science meet. It is a point where you are creating something from a piece of clay that has charisma, aura, and personality. And you do that by using what I call tricks of the trade, really, and all these aspects that come together. It is where science and art meet, I think.
Mm. You do moulding.
Mm.
Why did you choose that over carving? And do you teach carving?
We don't teach carving. And the reason is that everyone thinks that I'm incredibly patient because the sculptures that I do are complex and detailed. But the reality of it is that all of it is a trick. And I'm not that patient. So I want things to happen quickly. So when I'm putting clay on, it's lovely. I can make a gesture in clay, which is like drawing a line on a piece of paper. And if that gesture is wrong, I can move it or take it away or remodel it. When it comes to carving, the process slows down enormously, and you have to use a different approach altogether. It's a pointing approach. So if you want to do realist art as a carver, you're using a different skill base, really. And although they did that a lot in the Renaissance, right up to Rodin, did it, was renowned for his marble work. Very often they got somebody else in to do it because they didn't have time to do it themselves. And B, those processes are no longer necessary unless you have a passion for stone or wood, which I don't have particularly. I love the process and I love the result of it. And I love being awed by what they did, but I'm not interested.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I model and then I take it to a mold and then cast in whatever material is appropriate. And that process I really, really love. And I think it comes down to passion, Leslie. It's all about where your comfort zone is and also where your skill base and passion is.
Mm. So the sculpture school, what triggered that off? Why did you start teaching and why did you set up the sculpture school?
That was one of those real key moments in life where things changed. I was really struggling to make it as an artist. And I think as an artist, you've got to be incredibly determined because the income base is never, it yo-yos. I find it incredibly stressful and always have done. And when I met Diane, my wife, one of the things that she created with me was the notion that I should teach rather than just creating. And it fascinated me, the teaching side of it, because one of the things that really worried me when I started out as a sculptor was that because nobody trains people anymore to do figurative work, you have to teach yourself. I was teaching myself, in effect, to create commercial work for money. So I was doing that right at the very beginning of my career, whilst working as a manager for another company. And it was that aspect of the way that it grew that so
About the
I've lost my
sculpture school.
it's the sculpture.
Sculpture school.
That's the trouble with getting old, Leslie, is that your mind drifts away
It just went off on its own tangent there.
and
You're
I
in
got
a
lost
you're in
as
a
I was
lovely
moving away from you can
place.
see it in my eyes, you can the panic that goes in
You're
behind
in
my eyes.
a
It
lovely
was about
place.
only for me. But anyway,
Back to the sculpture
everybody
school.
else in the office is laughing now, so I'll get back to the point. Uh, it was creating the school that made me stop and think about how I did what I did. So I was teaching myself, but at the same time, I was missing certain aspects of it. And I was looking at some of the work that I did. I mean, amazingly, I created a company back in 1999 that became busy and successful. I was working for cruise liners, I was working for other artists, and I was working for private commissions, and I got a lot of work that way. So I managed to run the business okay. But I was looking at my work and thinking half of it, 50% of it, I'd say is below par. So it was not what I thought was good enough. Interestingly, it was good enough for the client, but for me, I felt that I just scraped through by the skin of my teeth. And it's certainly that it's design that matters. Design is everything. You can do loads and loads of beautiful fiddly work around the edges, but if the design's not good, then the whole thing doesn't work. And it was that aspect and that realization that made me realize that I could formulate a way of teaching that explained what I was doing in layman's terms. And I think it's that that makes the difference between what I'm teaching here and what is taught elsewhere, is that it's about teaching it in a way that is easy to understand. There's no art language around it that makes it complex. And I can do it because every aspect of the way that I look at sculpture is practical. If I'm using a system, that system has to work. If it doesn't, it's not part of my repertoire and it's not part of what I teach. So it becomes very focused. And I think that that has grown as the school has grown with me. And rather selfishly, I think I'm the one that's gained the most from this because I love passing on that information. I've got no worries about passing on anything. I won't hold anything back. And I know lots of tutors that are my friends, and I know they hold stuff back. They keep it secret so that nobody can become as good as they are. But I've never given away any information that's damaged my career. And I want to give that information away. I want to be able to tell people exactly how to do something and exactly how it works so that they can go on and become great sculptors in their own right. So as the school develops, that's what the prerogative behind it's become. And that skill base that enables me to teach people in a way that they get it straight away has increased. And I love it. I love teaching. I love that performance that you put on to inspire people, because that's what teaching's all about. It's about inspiration. If you want to really learn to become a sculptor, you have to study and you have to practice. And there is no excuse for that. There's no way round it. When students actually agree to do that, a bit like you're finding with me, is when they're ready to do it. So it becomes something that you can't absolutely control. But the school and everything that came from it came from Diane and myself working together, that became something that grew into something that's become quite amazing, actually. I never thought that people would come from all over the world, and I never thought that they'd feel the way they feel about it, which is wonderful.
What an amazing legacy you're creating. It's
Sorry,
incredible,
yeah, I
isn't
think,
it? And an amazing legacy of all these amazing artists, because you're not keeping secrets. You're sharing all your secrets openly, and you're demystifying, which is incredible. And I know I've spoken to quite a few students of yours, and they just love you. They love the performative aspect of it. They love the
yes,
fact
they
that
like my jokes.
they like you. Well, I don't know about that. They love the live streaming aspect of it, so they can see you doing it and see it on a screen as well. So you see it from all different angles. They love the community aspect of it, of sitting down for lunch and, you know, all being together, because you do it for like a week, don't you? You do week sessions, and then you do year sessions. So people can join either just for a one-off week, or they can come for a longer period of time, up to a year at the moment. I'm sure we'll advance on from that to several years. But at the moment,
we've got
it's a year.
students now working 2 years and 3 years, which I think is brilliant. They need that time.
Yeah, it takes time, doesn't it? Like everything takes time to percolate.
Yeah. I think in the first year you are struggling to get the concept of it all, and then the second year you can begin to start learning how to use it. It's a bit like starting the engine of a car and not having any idea how you're going to make that engine make the car go forwards. And gradually you start to learn to use the clutch, the brake, the gear lever, if it's an old-fashioned car, of course. But that's quite a lot of dexterity in order to make that happen. And I think it's a good analogy for the way that you learn to become more dexterous, really. That skill base begins to build up. I remember years ago, actually, when I was teaching myself, is that I felt that there was a book. There must have been a book written in the late 1800s, when I think that sculpture really reached its zenith as far as the skill base was concerned. But somebody must have written down the tricks of the trade that creates the beauty of the sculptures that you see around London from that kind of period. And I honestly think, apart from Edward Lanteri's book, which is wonderful, but there's elements of it missing, that those secrets are missing. I wanted a book give me those secrets. I don't think one exists, actually. So what I've done in my career as a teacher is put down those secrets so that it's there for the next generation, the generation after that, so that they can understand how things are made. And it strips away what is the essential belief that it has to come from some sort of amazing talent that is coursing through your body. Talent's brilliant, but it needs controlling and it needs educating, actually, as well. And that's what, I feel, or I've been excited about doing anyway.
I love the analogy that if you can make vodka out of a potato. You can pretty much. It's not about talent. You've said it yourself in this while we've been chatting over and over again. It's not about talent. It's about perseverance about feeling
Mm.
and about noticing.
Mm.
Noticing that this is something that you could do and you like and you're passionate about.
Mm.
And then
Absolutely.
then you go into the find a talented person who has knowledge, learn, and practice.
Absolutely. It fascinates me actually how much practice is involved. And I think, again, as I teach, I'm constantly making maquettes and small pieces to teach students. I'm doing over and over and over again till I've made hundreds and hundreds of hands, hundreds and hundreds of little anatomical bodies. And the power that gives you is quite staggering. I find that the legacy of that, from my point of view, and what I want to pass on to my students, is that I'm 62 now, and I can see the rest of my life as very exciting because I will just be able to carry on doing this for the rest of my life. I'll never retire. And it's a new perspective on life for me because we're all taught to retire. We're all taught to get a good job, to be sensible, get a house, do all these things that you should be doing. And then at the age of 50 or whatever, 60, you retire and you go to garden centres and have coffee with your friends, and your world just shrinks away. And actually, it's more and more as I've got older and I've watched my friends do exactly that. I want to do the exact opposite, actually. And life is so much more exciting as it grows and develops, and your skill base grows and develops too. And to give that away as a gift to other people, to me, is just fantastic. Couldn't give anything else. What a lovely thing to give away.
Isn't that the ultimate purpose in life? To give it, find what you love and then give it away.
Mm,
Yeah.
I think so. I always think of Stradivarius. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I love that idea of like actually, that's just it's just our old-fashioned industrial revolution planning and programming, isn't it? It's like, oh, we can't have this workforce forever being there. They're too old now. They're going to hurt themselves or get stuck in a machine, so they have to stop doing it. And actually, we don't live our lives like that anymore. I don't plan to retire. I have no plans to retire, and I have no plans to shrink my life as you describe it,
Yes.
And I love the fact that I have a lot of clients who are 60, 70. I even have some clients who are 80. And you do too at the school. I know that people find art as something that they love to do once they finish doing that job that they were told they had to do to make money and pay their mortgage. Then they come across art, and that's a lovely they're perfect for the sculpture school because they'll have the time and they'll have the wherewithal to be able to spend that time with you learning properly, not in a rush. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, pleasure. It brings a spiritual aspect to it, which I never saw coming, to be quite honest, that helps you overcome that programming, I think. And I think it's a lovely way to finish the interview, actually. I think it's the magic to that.
Yeah, it is. It's a very holistic approach to life, isn't it? It's like looking at life as a whole as opposed to segmented parts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, don't try and break it up. Actually, just live it as a whole and be present in the present moment and do what you think you love. And that's what you're doing. You're living a living embodiment of that and a great role model.
Yes, just don't talk to Diane about it, okay? We'll leave it with that one.
Don't speak to Diane about it. No. But if you
She's
want
my
to,
wife, in case you're wondering.
if you want to join the sculpture school and you want to, you're watching this and you think, I need to go there because they're in the most beautiful location in Devon at Bondley in North Taunton. And I've been there and it's absolutely beautiful. And they have lovely accommodation as well. I can recommend. And they're quite good cooks. I shouldn't give all this away, should I? Then you definitely need to speak to Diane because she is the lady who knows how to do all the booking and everything. So Diane is your lady about all of that. So or Ingrid, they'll be on the other end of the phone. And if you need, if you feel motivated and desire to go and learn with Andrew, then all the details will be in the all the information underneath this YouTube video, so you'll be able to see that. All the links will be there. Thank you, Andrew, for spending your lunch break with me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It was brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.